Ever wanted to automate the process of creation of virtual machines in Azure based on the ServiceNow request or request from any other digital workflows that the enterprise uses? Or wanted to automate the process of updating and patching the virtual machines in Azure in an IaaS deployment? There could also be scenarios where you want to maintain the configurations of the virtual machines. This can be for the applications or other operations that the VM performs. Well, Azure Automation is the answer for you. Hi there, my name is Neeraj Kumar. I'm a cloud evangelist and architect, and I will be your instructor for this course. This is a 3-part series in which we will discuss about the creation of the virtual machines in this module, and in the next 2 modules, we will discuss about the desired state configuration and the update management using Azure Automation. So there is a lot to cover. Let's get started. Before we actually dive into the demo, I wanted to show you a high-level diagram that I have put together to show the complete process flow. So the user uploads the Excel file to the blob storage. These Excel files contains information about the virtual machines to be created, like the virtual machine name, the type of virtual machines in terms of the operating system and the image, and there are other informations as well. Once the Excel file is uploaded to the blob storage, an event is triggered which is handled by the event grid. Since the event grids have the publish-subscribe model, it publishes the topics to the listeners. And here we have the Azure Automation Service listening to the events coming from the blob storage. Once the Azure Automation Service gets the event, it goes to the blob storage and gets the Excel file, reads the information, and then starts the process of deployment of the virtual machines. And finally, deploys it to the virtual network that is already there. Here, I have tried to go a step further to see if there are available IP addresses within the subnet. If the subnet allows for additional IP addresses, then the virtual machine is created in the existing subnet, else a new subnet is created, and then the virtual machine gets created within that subnet. So that is it about the process flow. Let's get cracking on the demo. So here we are on our Azure portal, and the first thing we are going to do is to create a resource group. We'll click on resource group and then click on add. And once we are on the page, we'll give it a name, ATCSL. The region is going to be East US, and then we will click on review and create and finally create. This is a quick process. Once this is done, we will search for virtual networks in the search bar and we'll click on virtual networks. Once we are there, we'll click on add. And then we will select the resource group which we just created, ATCSL. The region is going to be East US, and we'll give it a name of ATCSL VNet. So once that is done, we'll click on next IP addresses. And on this page, I see that it has the IP addresses that is needed for the demo, which is 10.0.0.0/16 CIDR notification, and the subnet is default with 10.0.0.0/24. So nothing needs to be changed. We'll click on security next, and there is nothing to be changed. So we'll just click on review and create and finally click on create. This also is a quick process and will be deployed soon. And once this is done, we'll be creating the network security group. So this is done. We will go back to the search bar and type in NSG, and we'll select the network security group, click on add, and there again, we will choose the resource group as ATCSL and give it the name of ATCSL NSG. The region is going to be East US and nothing else to be done. So we will click on review and create, and once validated, we'll click on create again. So the deployment is complete. We will click on go to resource. Here we are on the network security group page, and we can see the inbound and the outbound security rules. We will click on inbound security rules and then click on add to open the port 3389 from any source. So we will open the port 3389 and then scroll down, give it a name of port_3389. And once that is done, we will click on add. So a new rule is being added, and then we will click on the search bar, type in storage account and click on storage account to create one. So we'll click on add, and once we are on the page, we will select the resource group as ATCSL, scroll down, For the storage account name, we will choose ATCSL storage. And for the location is East US, the performance tier is a standard. The account kind is a storage V2, general purpose V2. And the replication, we will change it to locally redundant storage for this demo. Once that is done, we will click on Next Networking. Here, we don't need to change anything. It seems perfect. So we'll click on Next Data Protection. In the Data Protection tab, you can turn on the point-in-time restore and turn on soft delete for blobs and file shares, which is not needed for now. So we will click on Advanced. And here we notice that the advanced TLS version is version 1.2, which is fine when we are working with Azure Automation Runbooks. So nothing needs to be changed. I see everything is fit and fine here. So now we are going to click on Review and Create. And finally, once everything is validated, we will click on Create. The deployment of the storage account is in progress. And as a next step, we need to create the Azure Automation account. So we will go to the search bar again and type in automation. We will see automation accounts. So we are going to click on that and then click on the add button. Once we are on that page, the first thing we are going to do is to give it a name, ATCSL automation. And then the subscription is pay as you go. The resource group we will choose as ATCSL. The location is East US, and for create Azure Run as account, we can leave it as is at yes to create the service principal along with the automation account, but I will choose as no so that I could show you the dependencies of the service principal and how it exactly works. So once that is done, we will click on create. So this is done quickly, and once that is done, we'll go to the resource. And the first thing we are going to do is to create credentials. So we will scroll down and click on credentials and click on add a credential. But before we do that, what we are going to do is to create a service principal. And for that, we will go to gist.github.com, and you can find me easily by doing gist.github.com/neerajks77. And here you have the create service principal.ps1. You can click on it and then click on raw, copy the code from here, and you can run it on Azure PowerShell. So you can type in shell.azure.com, connect to your tenant, and then paste the command. Hit enter. And once you are done, the function is ready for use. You can call that function and pass on the username and password, and then hit enter. It will create the service principal for you, and then you can go back and use that in the credentials. So I'll go back to my portal, give the name as creds, and for the username, I need to go to the Azure Active Directory, click on the service principal, and take the application ID from there. So I'll open one more tab there and log into my account, go to Azure Active Directory, and then click on app registrations. There you will see SP automation already created. I'll click on that. And from here, I need to copy the application ID, and this will act as the username. So I'll copy it, go back to my previous tab, paste it here, and for the password, it's the same that we passed when creating the service principal. So I'll quickly type in the password and retype the password again, and then click on create. This is done, and as a next step, we are going to create several variables, and click on variables and then add a variable. The first one is the tenant ID. It's of type string, and the value for this tenant ID, we can get it by running the get subscription command on the PowerShell. So here we have the tenant ID. I'll copy it, go back to the portal and paste it here. Click on create. Now this is done. We'll create other variables as well. So I'll click on add a variable. The next one is the storage account. So the type is a string, and the storage account value is ATCSL storage. Click on create again, and then repeat the same steps for the virtual network and the NSG, which is the network security group. Now that all the variables have been defined, we are going to import the modules that are required for us to work on the runbooks. So we will click on modules, and then one at a time, we are going to import those modules. We will click on browse gallery, and then the first one will be the az.accounts, because this is needed for all the authentication purposes. Now all of the modules are dependent on the az.accounts, so we need to get the az.accounts completed, and then we will be importing all of the modules like az.automation, az.compute, az.network, az.resource, az.storage, and then we also need to import the import Excel module that we'll be using for processing the Excel file. If we now click on the ATCSL automation from the breadcrumb navigation, we can see that the az.accounts is still importing. So we will wait for this to get completed as I already mentioned, and then we will get started with the rest of the modules. So after a couple of refreshes, I see that the az.accounts has been completed, so we'll get started with the remaining ones. And the final one is import Excel. So I will remove everything from here and then type in import Excel. Click on it and then click on import. So we are done importing all the modules. We will go back to the breadcrumb navigation, ATCSL automation, and we will wait for all the modules to be imported. Here we see that the az.resources and az.storage is still pending, and if we scroll down, import Excel is also getting imported. So after a couple of refreshes, we see that all the modules have been imported and import Excel is there with the version of 7.1.1. The next step is to create the runbooks. But before doing that, let me take you to the browse gallery, and there you have the pre-existing runbooks that you can use. So you can use the start Azure VMs or stop Azure VMs. They are pre-created for you by Microsoft and you can use them. So we are not going to use this. We'll go back and click on create a runbook. We will create a new runbook, give it a name of Initiator Watcher Runbook, and then the runbook type is PowerShell, and then click on create. As the runbook has been created now, it's time to pour in the commands. So I'll go back to my gist and go back. Click on Neeraj K77 and then scroll down. Here you will see initiate watcher process.ps1, and that is what we are going to use. So we will click on it and then click on raw and then copy all the code and then paste it in the runbook. Let's first try to understand what this code does. Firstly, it is creating some of the variables. One is the creds, it is getting it from the credentials. Then is the tenant ID. It is also creating variables for resource group, automation account name, and the storage account. And if you notice, the storage account and the tenant ID, they are being fetched from the automation variables that we had defined earlier. And then it is creating the storage context. So when we talk about the storage context and the SAS token, they are needed when you are accessing the file share or the blob storage, because directly you cannot access them. So we have the start time, the end time, the storage account details, and then we are creating the SAS token for that account. And then we also need the storage context where we need to pass on the SAS token. So once that is done, there we have the try import module, import Excel. This is not needed because we have already imported the import Excel module, but this is already written. So you can comment that out. And then we have the path. Now here you see the env:temp and then the VM details.xlsx. So this is the path where this PowerShell script is running. So this is the environment variable. It's a temp location where the new file will be created. So in case the file already exists, it will delete it. And then we are trying to access the blob storage using the $blob. So it is trying to access the create vm.xlsx file from the blob storage, and then it is trying to copy it to the path that we have already defined. Once that is done, we have a variable called Excel value. What it is doing is it is importing the Excel from the paths that we have defined, and it is using the worksheet name worksheet 1, and then it's starting at row 1 and column 1. That is, it is starting at cell number 1. And for each row, it is getting the value in a variable called VM parameters. So we have the name, the computer name, the location, and then the resource group, local admin user, password, size, publisher name, offer name, and the SKU. Once that is done, we are calling another PowerShell, which is create virtual machine.ps1 and passing on that parameter. Why I have done that? I could have written the PowerShell commands in the same runbook, but why I did this? Because I wanted to make the code more modular and easy to understand. And that is why we will be creating another runbook and we will be using another PowerShell script from my gist. We will click on save, and once that is done, we will click on publish, click on yes, and we are done. The runbook has been published. And now what we are going to do is to click on another tab and then go to the subscription, because here we need to give the service principal SP automation that we had created earlier the permissions to run the PowerShell command and access different services. So we will go to subscription, click on access control, and then click on role assignments. Here we will click on add role assignment and then select the role of a contributor and then search for SP automation. There you go. We'll select it and then click on save. So now this account has all the permissions that is needed. So now we'll search for the storage account and click on the storage account name. And there we are going to create the container create VM. So we'll click on container and then type in create VM and then finally click on create. So if you remember from the PowerShell script, this is the container which is being accessed from the blob. Let me now explain to you what the Excel file looks like. This is what the Excel file is. It has the name of the VM, the location, the resource group name along with the SKU, the size that the virtual machine should be, the local administration username, password with the publisher name, offer name of Windows Server, and the computer name of Computer 1 and Computer 2. So these are some of the parameters. You can go ahead and define more if you want, and you can have them accessed in the runbook. We will minimize the Excel workbook, go back to the Azure portal, and then create another runbook. Now this time also the runbook type is of PowerShell and the name is the same that we had referenced in our previous PowerShell script. So this is create virtual machine. We will copy this, go back to the portal, paste it here. The runbook type, as I already said, is PowerShell, and then click on create. Once this is done, we are going to go back to the gist and copy the script for the creation of the virtual machine. So we'll click on my name, scroll down, and then from here you see the create virtual machine action runbook. We'll click on it and then click on raw. Copy the complete script from here, go back to the portal and paste it. Let me explain what actually is happening. We will scroll up. And the first thing it is doing is it is getting the parameters from the PowerShell, and then it is trying to fetch the variables from the automation account, which is spcred, the tenant ID, the VNet, and the NSG name. And then we have certain global and local variables initialized to blank currently, and we will be populating them. We then have the load VM details. This is the function that is created for populating the variables from the array that was passed from the previous PowerShell script. So we have the VM name, the computer name, location, resource group, the local admin user, password, the size of the VM, along with the publisher name, offer, and the SKU. These are the details. After population, we will be passing it in the create VM function to create the virtual machine. We will scroll down and let me explain what this function does. In the create VM, we are getting all the parameters, and here if you see VM local administrator password, we are converting it to secure string by using the convert to secure string command. So once that is done, what we are doing is create the public IP name and then creating the public IP. And then credentials, we are using the new system object, system management automation.ps credential, and we are passing the username and password. This is the credential that will be used during the creation of the virtual machine because this is a required parameter. Once that is done, we are initializing the NSG ID, and then we will be creating the network interface card using the variable NIC. So once all this is done, we are going to create a variable called virtual machine where I'm passing on different parameters like the VM size, VM name for the configuration, and then for the operating system, we have taken the same variable and passing different parameters in terms of computer name, the credential, and all of the details. That is done. Next step, we are going to add the network interface, which we had already created earlier. We are passing in the ID of the network interface card. And then for the virtual machine, we are setting the image source where we are using the same variable, and we are using the publisher name, the offer, the SKU, and the version is latest. Once everything has been done, then we are calling the command new azvm with the resource group name, the virtual machine, and the location, and that will create the new virtual machine for us as needed. So before calling the load VM details, we are also calling get subnet. And what this does is, as I had already explained previously while I was showing the process flow diagram, that it will check the existing subnet. If there are available IPs, it will take the same subnet. Else, if there are no IPs left, it will create a new subnet and then use that particular subnet. So now this is done. We will click on save and then publish this workbook as well. We are now going to create the event grids. For this, we will search for events and then click on event grid topics. Once we are there, we are going to click on the add button. And on the create topic page, we are going to choose resource group as ATCSL. Scroll down, give this event grid a name, which is ATCSL event grid or ATCSL events. And for the location, I'm going to choose East US. We will click on next advanced. And here I don't see anything that I need to change here. The event schema, I want it as event grid schema. So we are good. So we will click on review and create. And once that is done, we will click on create again. So the deployment of event grid is in progress and it will be completed soon. Once that is done, we need to create the event subscription. So this is completed. I can go to resource and I can click on event subscription to create the event subscription. But I will not do it from here. I'll do it from the automation accounts page. But even before I do that, I do need to perform one more action. I'll scroll down and in the runbooks, I'll go to import watcher runbook. And I need to create a webhook for this so that the event subscription can happen over the webhook and the events from the storage account can be sent over to this webhook. So we will give this webhook a name, which is the watcher hook, and I'll keep it as enabled. For the expires, it is just exactly 1 year from today. And then the URL, I'll copy this URL and paste it in a notepad, because once you are out of this, you will lose track of this URL completely. So you need to copy this URL and put it somewhere for use later. So I'll put it in the notepad, minimize this and click on OK. We don't need to make any other changes. So we will click on create and the webhook will be created for us. It is a quick process. And now that it is done, we will go back to the runbook. And since this is in edit mode, I'll click on publish. So this is done. Now we are going to create the event subscription. So I'll go to ATCSL automation again, scroll down and click on event grid. Now from here, I'll click on event subscription. I'll give this a name, which is automation subscription. For the event schema, I'll not change it. For the topic types, I'll choose storage accounts. And subscription, I'll choose as pay as you go, the one that I have, the ATCSL as a resource group, and the resources is ATCSL storage, the storage account that I had created earlier. For the system's topic name, I'm going to provide topics for watcher. For filter to event types, I'll just choose blob created. I have other options as well, but this is the one I'll choose. For the endpoint type, I'll choose webhook. And for the endpoint, I'll paste the same URL which I had copied earlier. So this is where it will be consumed. Once that is done, I'll click on create and the deployment of the event subscription is in progress. So this is done now. And we see that both the runbooks that we have are published. So our next step would be to upload the Excel file and see how it works. So here is the real testing time. But before doing that, I wanted to show you that if I go to the virtual network, I see that the subnet has all 251 IP addresses available. So that depicts that none of the IP addresses have yet been consumed. Just to cross-verify, I'll go to the virtual machines and we see that there are no existing virtual machines. So now we will start with the creation of the virtual machines using the Azure automation. So we'll go to the storage account, we will click on the containers, and here under create VM container, I'm going to upload the Excel file that I had created earlier. I'll click on open and then click on upload. So I can check this if there are existing file, but that is not the case. So I'll click on upload and that is it. We will go to the Azure automation page and see how it is working. Scroll down, go to the runbooks and then click on the import watcher runbook. Here you will see that the status is showing as running. So it means that the event was captured and the runbook initiated. We can click on it, get inside and see how it is performing, and the status is still running. If you look at here, the value shows as webhook because that is where the runbook was initiated from. So now the status shows as completed. It means that the runbook stopped processing. We can go and see the output. It seems that it did not work properly. It is just showing the subnet name here. If I go to errors, yes, there we have all the errors. It did not run properly. We'll click on the topmost error and see where the problem is. So we will click on it. Oh, it shows that the resource of the VM that we wanted to create and the resource group are not in the same location. So what I'm going to do here is, oh, this location is Central US. I'm going to change it to East US because that is what we had created earlier for the event grids. So East US here and then again East US for the another VM, and all other resources are from the East US. So that is where the problem was. So I will delete all the previous resources and will try to upload the file again and see how it is working. So what I will do is I will first delete all the resources that were created, and the VM was although not created, but all other resources like the NSG or the network interface, they were all created. So I will delete them, deallocate them, and then upload the file again. So I've uploaded the file again and come back to the automation runbook and see here that it is running. If we see this is completed. If you look at the output, here you go. Now this time it has run perfectly fine. It shows the subnet name and then it shows other details as well. If we go to the errors, we won't find any errors for this run. So what we can do is we'll go back to the virtual machines, and there you can see VM1_Windows and VM2_Windows created for us. If we click on it, we can see that it has a public IP address and it has all other details like standard DS1v2, the one that we had provided in the Excel. And we can see the different properties, even the plan. And similarly for the other windows, it has another public IP address here if you see with the same SKU, and here the plan is 2019 data center. So let's check what was for the previous one. So we'll click on the virtual machines, go to previous virtual machine, scroll down and see that this one is 2012 R2 data center. So that concludes the demo, and we see that everything is running perfectly fine, and that is how you automate the process of creation of the virtual machines if there are requests from the ServiceNow or any other digital workflow that the enterprise uses. So you can automate the processes and you can do many more things than just creating the virtual machines. And some of them we will see in our next sessions, like creation of the desired state configurations as well as the update management configuration. So hope you like this video, and if you do like it, give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel so that I could bring more informational videos to you and you can get the first-hand notification when I upload them. Thank you so much for watching, and until we meet next time, keep azuring.